Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Damn You Hollywood. I'm Robert Winfrey, and tonight we will be reviewing Dunkirk. I'm trying to get the information out before I go into any kind of tangent or shtick or gimmick because, well, I don't mind tangents. Neither does Mark, neither does, anyone really on this show. But there comes a point when information has to be provided rather than just, the silliness. So, anyway, thank you all for listening. Again, tonight we are reviewing Christopher Nolan's World War II movie Dunkirk, specifically about the Dunkirk evacuation. And we have a guest who will be calling in later. Andrew Graham is going to be calling in as soon as he is able to. So, looking forward to getting his take on this movie once we get going. But here with me, again, I mentioned him already, the spiritual patriarch, the man who puts up all the cash. He is operating at a deficit because he just loves doing this. He is the, on a much smaller scale, I am the Eric Bischoff to his, why can't I remember that guy's last name?
Ted Turner.
Turner. God, I hate myself. Yeah. Again, on a smaller scale, I am the Eric Bischoff to his Ted Turner. Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm torturing myself, Robert Winfrey. I'm torturing myself. And you may be asking yourself, how are you torturing yourself, sir? Well, I'm watching a marathon of man-fire food. And there's nothing I enjoy more than a good barbecue. And this show is all about barbecue, and I can't have none of it. None of it, I tell you. So I'm just torturing myself by watching all this great barbecue that's being presented, and there's none for Marky.
That sucks. I am sorry for your predicament. I joked that I've legitimately. Go ahead.
The stuff on the show is actually really good. I mean, they come up with some pretty inventive ways to smoke and barbecue food. I'm sitting here joking about this makes me want to go out and buy barbecue, but not even the barbecue around here is going to be nearly as good as the shit I see on this television show. If my daughter just fell off the bed. In any case, I do enjoy watching this show. This show is total food porn.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do with my life if I couldn't eat meat. I mean, legitimately one of my worst nightmares is developing some medical condition that precludes me from consuming red meat. I wake up one morning and it's like, okay, no more beef, limited, no more pork, limited fish, and very limited fowl. And is life worth living at this point?
Well, I'll tell you, when they upped my chemo, and they said, like, oh, you're not progressing as fast as we'd like you to, I actually started eating vegan for about a week, and it was not easy. I mean, it's not that eating vegan is the worst thing ever. It's that it takes a lot more preparation and it's a lot more time consuming, because you really do have to prepare. You can't just grab and go. And the other thing I noticed was, like, even if you go to gas stations, whatever, like, they have salads, but everything's got meat in it or dairy. So, like, you can't just buy a garden salad anymore. You have to buy like a chef salad or a Caesar salad. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a little bit sad as far as that goes. I have an ex who got over cancer in large part, and she went raw vegan for the totality of that and actually stayed that way.
Mm-hmm.
In large part because fearful
of
recursion.
Yeah, no, I get it. Believe me. It just became too much for me and my family. I mean, yeah, so was having cancer, but I'm kind of hoping I get over the cancer without.
I mean, really, why compound the issues of? I mean, cancer sucks, but now I got to go like raw vegan.
Just torturing myself.
I mean,
Speaking of
yeah.
torturing myself.
All right. With that little bit of these days in the lives of Mark and Robert out of the way, the actual movie we're here to talk about. Okay, Mark,
Dunkirk.
I know that I was the one who kind of insisted this be on the schedule. You were, when we laid it out prior to a bunch of other movies getting shifted around, and I was looking at your schedule going, okay, I want to kill myself, I want to kill myself, I want to kill myself, I'm okay with this, please, like praying for injury on occasion. I kind of insisted this one be on the schedule, so this one's on me. And normally, it's easy to figure out why we put things on the schedule. This one as well, it was a major release. Because I put it on, because I'm the one who insisted on this. I'm the one who knew a little bit about the subject material. I'm the one who likes Christopher Nolan's films. You not so much. Were you like cursing my name as this date was approaching? Did you have any expectations for the film itself? Were you just sitting there going, "I hate you, Robert, so freaking much. Why, oh why would you do this to me?" What you went into this one thinking about and expecting?
Nothing so dramatic. Though that's funny. It was more of like I totally understood why we were watching it, and as I was watching the movie, like clearly it was a very well done film. I just got very caught up in I don't understand why this got a summer release. And I know I said that about something else recently, but
last week you lamented that War for the Planet of the Apes was summer, while Geostorm, that turkey.
Right, that's right. See, that made all the sense in the world to me.
Seriously, did you see did you get? I hate to disrupt you here, but did you get the extended trailer for Geostorm in front of Dunkirk like I did?
I may have, yeah.
Okay, because their first trailer was like a shot-for-shot rip-off of the trailers for San Andreas. Somehow this one made it look even worse.
In any case, this is an Oscar contender. I mean, it's very well acted. It's very well shot. But it's not the kind of, all-fire summer blockbuster that you would normally see. So I thought it was weird that it got a summer release. I didn't hate it. I don't know if I would have gone to the movie to see it, though. Like, if we weren't reviewing it, this was definitely one that I would have watched possibly at home, but I don't think I would have gone to the theaters to see it. Like, when we, the Quentin Tarantino film, The Hateful Eight, that was something I wanted to see in the theaters, and that's not necessarily a blockbuster. But we insist. But I really like Quentin Tarantino, much like you like Christopher Nolan, and so I insisted that we review it. And that to me was a cinematic experience. And I can see where you could make the argument that this is a cinematic experience too. I'm just not as interested.
I would absolutely argue that this is a film that is enhanced by seeing it in theaters. Honestly, it's one of the things I personally appreciate about Nolan's films is that he shoots them to be seen on a big screen. We've actually talked about this in the past, I believe, you and I, Mark, that, people of our generation and, our parents' generation, there used to be the phrase, I don't know how ubiquitous this was in, your social circles or whatnot, but the phrase "you have to see it on the big screen" was a real thing when I was younger. And that has been lost by a lot of filmmakers. They don't shoot things to be seen on that scale. They come formatted and sized for your freaking phone. And don't get me, I'm not complaining about, and please bear in mind, I am not necessarily complaining about ease of access or availability. But there are certain films that, I like that you should see it under the optimal settings. And that's not, 1080p on your phone. I thought, more so than this one, I thought Interstellar was that way. I've seen that I saw it twice.
I was thinking of The Dark Knight. They shot that entire opening sequence in IMAX, and it really is meant to be seen on the big screen. And it definitely loses something when you see it on the smaller screen. Okay. I get it.
Yeah, again, it's one of the things I appreciate about his films, that you can see them and you can enjoy them outside of the theater, but the experience is enhanced by actually going to a movie theater. Other people might feel the exact opposite. Like, how dare these movies not be idealized for, again, your smartphone or your iPad or what have you? And I get it. I get it. I'm turning into the get off my lawn guy. I get it. I really do.
I was going to say, I think what you're alluding to is that a lot of filmmakers are not taking advantage of the film medium, and they're putting out a product that can be seen anywhere, that's ubiquitous. And they're not really making films to be played in theaters. It's films to be released in China and films to be seen on your phone and on your iPad. And, Christopher Nolan takes us back to a place where, we're actually looking at film to be seen on the big screen, which there's something to be said for that. You're more of a war buff than I am, so I think what we're running into here is also the medium. Not the medium, the subject matter.
Yeah, the subject matter. Which is fair. I have a bizarre fascination with military history, specifically the Civil War in my case, the American Civil War, that is. But yeah, and I enjoy war films. And again, that's just personal preference. So, I believe we have Andrew here. So I'm gonna hope that I'm right here. Otherwise, I'm gonna sound like a jackass, which is no different from my average Tuesday evening. For those of you who may or may not know me personally, Andrew, is that you?
Well, hold Robert. I have saved you from being a jackass.
Woohoo!
How's it going, guys? Sorry about that.
No worries. How you doing this evening?
It's been an interesting evening, but we got it all sorted out, so.
The ritual of putting the small ones to bed. It's an adventure.
Oh, yes.
Mine is currently jumping off. My 3-year-old is currently jumping off the couch doing diving headbutts onto a mattress.
Yeah, because that worked out so well for the last couple of guys who have made that.
Yeah, believe me, I've already told Melissa I've got concerns about Jonas turning into Chris Benoit.
Or Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, true.
And again, I mean, so far, Bryan Danielson hasn't murdered anyone, but he did some damage to his career.
Yeah, he did. Yep, there he goes again. He just keeps diving off the couch onto a mattress. He's not going to be happy until we end up at Tampa General Hospital tonight.
No, I'm not going to a hospital.
Okay. You're not going to the
Well,
hospital.
if you do, it will be documented live on the internet. So,
yes. You do realize that if you hurt yourself tonight, the whole world will hear about it. Or at least the 13 people that will listen to this show.
It's a little more than 13, but all right. Anyway, Andrew, since you, I don't know if you, I'm curious because you and I believe you and I share a bit of an affinity for Nolan's films. Did you have any expectations going into this one before I get into the actual plot and we can review the craft and move on from the weekly gathering of old men?
No, that's fair. And I did jump in. Blog Talk now apparently wants me to sign in as a Blog Talk user before I can use Skype, so I'm just dialing in my normal way instead. I was able to listen to a part of the conversation beforehand. Before we get too far into that, I was kind of hearing some of the discussion about IMAX versus regular, and I fully endorse seeing this movie in IMAX. It's gorgeous. And if you guys are interested in kind of the larger question about format, things like that, there's a really excellent documentary called Side by Side, where basically it's an argument between two sets of filmmakers on film versus digital, and basically all these exact arguments. And Nolan very, very firmly sits on the film side of things.
Yeah, he did. And Mark and I were also kind of lamenting that the age of movies that are really meant to be seen on a big screen in a theater seems to be slowly going the way of the dodo, which depresses me greatly as a fan of film. But
that's fair. But I mean,
all right,
it's kind of
let's go ahead.
You're kind of seeing it.
Go ahead.
I was about to say you're kind of seeing it go both ways, because I think especially when you talk about the levels of engagement around Oscar season and stuff like that, I think it would be beneficial for some movies to go to a dual digital release, just so people will have seen them before the Oscars come out.
Yeah, and smaller releases I completely understand. Just getting out there as much as possible.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Well, I'll tell you, Andrew, that was my original argument. Was why wasn't this released around Oscar time? I have no idea how this got a July release.
Because counter-programming is a thing.
What was that, Andrew?
Oh, I agree with you, Mark.
Okay.
Don't agree with him. You're feeding his ego. All right.
Sorry, back to the original question of the movie itself. I mean, my expectations on this were kind of mixed. In terms of, I mean, it's Christopher Nolan, so the movie's going to be gorgeous. It's going to be technically really good. It's going to engage you. It's going to be interesting. That said, I think when I originally heard this, as much as I was excited by it, I was also slightly worried by it in terms of, wow, this seems a little conventional for Nolan in terms of his subject matter and stuff like that. Then I saw the film. I mean, all of my previous expectations were in there, and then they did the thing with the time slip, and then I was over 1,000%.
I do want to talk about that because that was a lot of fun. It actually took me until about halfway through the film to really get that that's what they were doing there. So, all right, for those of you who wish,
thumbs up. So what?
All right, for those of you who wish to avoid spoilers, here's your last warning. Here comes your plot synopsis in 3, 2, 1. All right, this is a story about the actual historic event, the evacuation of Dunkirk, after the French army basically collapses. And I don't mean that in the, it's funny, the French, they all, their military failures, ha ha ha. I don't mean like that, but they were very unprepared for the tactics that Hitler employed when he invaded France. This is all documented. The British troops and the French remaining troops, they're all packed onto essentially this very small area in the town of Dunkirk, slowly being evacuated across the across the English Channel back to England to avoid an invasion and stall for. Again, it's a really interesting bit of history, and I will ask Andrew to elaborate a little bit on that once I get out of this. We follow one soldier in particular in the beginning. There's this thing, and again, talking about the time slippage. This follows three perspectives, one of which, the one we open with, is from the point of view of just a random soldier on the beaches of Dunkirk, and they refer to this as the mole, and the mole period, because that is what they refer to. That's the name for their giant pier they have to dock destroyers at, because destroyers have a significant amount of clearance on the bottom, and you can only approach so close to land. To mitigate this, you build out a giant pier, and they're loading from this pier. The story that takes place from that soldier's perspective unfolds over the course of about a week. You also get the story from the perspective of some British citizens who go out in their yacht. There's a general call given by the British government to commandeer all small craft, all civilian vessels, to go across the channel and to start, to help with the evacuation, because there's 300,000, 400,000 troops over there, and we kind of need our army. Hitler's not stopping anytime soon. And their perspective lasts about a day. And finally, we follow 3 fighter pilots as they come across the channel, engage in air support and aerial combat, so on and so forth. And their story lasts about an hour. And I bring that up just because when I bounce around a little bit here, that's primarily why. I apologize if that seems a little confusing, but hopefully that will help you follow along here. Anyway, our soldier on land, Tommy, that was his name. We follow him as he is the way we are illuminated as to the desperate situation. They're losing ground as they're trying to hold the perimeter. They're being strafed from the air. They're being bombed. There's artillery fire. And there's, again, hundreds of thousands of soldiers just on the beach waiting for their turn to be loaded into destroyers, basically one at a time. A few of the ships are bombed. He has some interesting adventures. He tries to sneak onto a ship by pretending to be he is a stretcher bearer. He and a friend of his pick up a wounded man on a stretcher, and they try to use that as a means of getting onto this ship. They get thrown off. That ship subsequently sinks. They are put back in line ahead of schedule. The group that the British citizen who comes over on a yacht stops and picks up Cillian Murphy, who's the only survivor of a U-boat attack of some variety. He's more than a little traumatized. He inadvertently causes the death of one of the crew on that ship. Again, it's just a small pleasure yacht. These aren't massive ships. As all those people are heading out. So Cillian Murphy does a really solid job. He's a good actor. And then again, we have the perspective of our fighter pilots, one of whom is Tom Hardy. The other is, I forget the actor's name. My apologies. And their stories intersect at various points. They're just more time is passing for one than the other. And I really do have to encourage you to see this because it makes more sense visually than it does me just sitting here explaining it. Anyway, Tommy is, again, there's some issues with him being able to get onto destroyers. The British Army and Navy stopped sending a bunch because you don't want to have all of your Navy in one place at one time, and they're losing about 1 out of every 2 or 3 ships that they send in because you know where they are. He tries to sneak out with a bunch of his comrades in a quasi-beached fishing trawler. That doesn't go so well as the Germans shoot up the hull and it starts sinking. He does wind up being rescued by the yacht because, again, intersecting timelines. As our fighter pilots, one of them winds up ditching in the ocean. He also winds up on the yacht. Tom Hardy's character saves shoots down a couple of planes, saves one ship from being bombed into complete oblivion, stops a strafing run right at the end before his plane runs out of gas, and he winds up coasting to a landing before being captured. I am really not doing this film justice, and I deeply apologize for this. So
he glide kills a Stuka.
That's true. And anyway, after all of the British, like civilian boats show up, and they're able to evacuate far and away the vast majority of the British troops back to the island. One of the British Navy guys deliberately stays behind, the guy who's in charge of the pier, to oversee the French evacuation, which is about to happen because most of the line holding, as the Germans are closing in, is being done by the French army, and he wants to make sure that they get out just as much as humanly possible. The British soldiers arrive back home and are afraid that they're going to be greeted with disgust and contempt for their retreat and their loss of basically all of France, and they're instead greeted as heroes. We close with Tommy reading Winston Churchill's famous speech that he delivers to the House of Commons regarding this whole situation. And incidentally, Gary Oldman's upcoming portrayal of Winston Churchill, his version of that speech is on all the trailers for that film. And can we finally get Gary Oldman an Oscar, please? This man's deserved it for 2 decades. Anyway, it closes with that being recited, the British people still having an unbroken spirit, and Tom Hardy being taken prisoner by the Germans. It's basically the only shot of actual Germans. I mean, you see some of their aircraft, but the only time you see Germans on the ground is out of focus as the 2 or 3 that come to take him into custody after he burns his airplane after he landed it. So again, I really do have to apologize. There's no way I can adequately do this justice just describing it. So I can only encourage you to go see the movie. But okay, before we get into the film craft and things of that nature, Andrew, I know you're a bit of an amateur military historian. Are there any major historical points that were left out that kind of got glossed over because we're making a movie, not a documentary type thing? How accurate was it, basically, and anything, your comments on the actual event of the Dunkirk evacuation and how it's represented here?
I mean, I'll start with a little bit of context first. So, I mean, the basic setup for Dunkirk was in a little longer-term history. So World War II started in September 1939 with the invasion of Poland. Basically, everyone declared war, started heavy mobilization, and once winter set in, is basically what turned into what was called the phony war, which basically was everyone staring at each other, wondering who was going to blink first. That persisted until about the spring of 1940, when the Germans first went in, and I believe they took over, I want to say, the Netherlands, Norway, and a couple other countries. And then on May 10th was when things began, the war as we kind of perceive it, began quite properly, with them actually starting the attack on Belgium and France. In terms of kind of how Dunkirk happened, and I'm gonna caveat myself here saying that this is definitely not my area of expertise. Most of what I wrote about in university ended up being more Normandy and Holland in 1944. But in terms of this, basically what happened is that you had the very famous Maginot Line that was guarded mostly by French colonials. You had the French and the British Expeditionary Force, which is what we're talking about here, basically sitting on the Belgian border waiting for the Germans to come across. They all engaged, but the Germans decide to surprise everybody by going through the Ardennes forest and basically cutting the line, causing everyone to start falling back. From what I know of this, and I'm going to start educating myself because I just bought the companion book to the movie, part of what happened is that the British looked at this situation, said, they've cut us in half, our better move is to just get out of here right now, and they started actually evacuating everybody first and basically let the French fight the rear guard, which is a little bit of what's depicted in the movie. At that point, I mean, you kind of had the big part of it. And to put things in perspective timeline-wise, the fight started on May 10th. This happened on May 26th. So we're talking about 16 days. You have a force of 300, actually probably closer to 400,000 on their heels, backs to the sea. And this isn't like, I mean, everyone makes the jokes about, the British and the French, and particularly the French surrender monkeys and stuff like that. Like, these were two not inconsiderable and relatively first-rate armies that absolutely started falling back in the face of completely new tactics. I mean, you can probably say what everyone was thinking was that you were going to engage in a ground war, probably stop it at some point, and maybe we'd see some redevelopment of trenches like what we saw in the First World War. Of course, at this point, the technology and the tactics had evolved, and we had moved into blitzkrieg, which had changed a lot of that. So I think it sets that up pretty quickly in terms of kind of where we are, and it gives you the broad strokes of it. In terms of the accuracy, I can't speak to every blow-by-blow event that happened, and obviously I think Nolan was going for a little bit of improvisation here as to show it, but I think they covered off all the main points of it, and I think, moreover, that they caught very much what the experience was of Dunkirk and talking about being stuck on a beach and caught there. My personal favorite parts were the Spitfire scenes. One, because my grandfather was actually a Royal Canadian Air Force during the Second World War. He didn't go overseas, but I kind of grew up in an Air Force family. I was a member of the Royal Canadian Air Cadets. Always loved going to air shows, always loved going to air museums. Spitfire's an amazing airplane, and I mean, I think that might be one of the things that resonated most with me, because they got that so far as being able to say that here's what it likes to be in one of these planes. Here's the rattle, here's the noise, here's everything about. They even got the formations right in terms of how the British were flying at the time. So, in that they definitely got it right. I think they definitely caught the whole idea of the small boats being brought in and coming back out. It sounds like there may be some debate over some of the lines they used in there about holding back some of the Navy and Air Force, but I also think that was correct just relative to what they had seen so far. But I mean, the dress was correct, the feel was correct, I think, and I think the way they represented it as being very much I'm going to say a cultural touchstone in terms of the English war, the British war effort, the Commonwealth war effort, if you will, to that point, is absolutely right. I mean, if we want to talk about more historical context on this thing, just to say, the one other big impact of this was, although they got 300,000 guys out, they left every piece of equipment back in France. The only formation capable of fully equipped infantry formation they had at the end of this was the 1st Canadian Infantry Division that was actually brought in well south of the main line when they tried to reinforce and tried to keep a fight on in France. Basically, their higher-ups took one look at the situation. They totally evacuated. And for a while, like I said, 1st Canadian Infantry Division was the only fully equipped formation in Britain. One division.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, Mark, as far as actual film craft and whatnot, what was your experience? What do you want to start unpacking here? I mean, I know you mentioned before the show to me that in a lot of ways, you're still trying to figure out how you actually feel about this. So, kind of talk us through it.
Yeah.
We'll get this in live time. Walk me through it.
This is one of those movies where I can appreciate how well it was put together. I don't know if I had a lot of fun at the movies. This is really not my bag. But look, let's go through it. I thought the actors did a good job portraying their roles. I like Tom Hardy as the Spitfire pilot. I enjoyed the one yacht. I don't know what you would call him, but the interactions between, what is it, Cillian something or other?
Yeah, Cillian Murphy.
The Cillian Murphy and the gentleman with the private boat. I enjoyed those interactions, those scenes. It looks great, like I said before. Nolan, obviously Christopher Nolan takes a lot of care into putting together these kinds of films, or why else do them? In terms of like a survival story, it doesn't get much better than this. You have an impossible situation. You have the horrors of war. Guys just drowning themselves in the water, and all of that, and this. We tend to glorify what war looks like, with Rambo and all of that, and then you see a situation like this, and you're like, oh, war sucks. You don't always see where the bullets are coming from. It's loud. It's horrifying. You can be dead at any moment. And even when you think you're safe, you're not. And I think all of that was captured very, very well. I mean, war is not something one should be doing lightly. And I think that's the message I pulled out of the movie. I don't really have a lot to say beyond that. I'll normally offer up like different craft suggestions or things they could have done. I really don't know what else he could have done to make this movie better. I'm not the historical expert that Andrew is, so I can't speak to that end of it. I think if anything, the movie moves a little slow for me at times, but that just might be the nature of the subject matter. But without finding reasons to nitpick, I'm going to go ahead and say, it was a very well done movie, and I hope it cleans up the Oscars.
All right. As for me, I really loved the Spitfire scenes as well. These were, for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why this is, but there's been a real difficulty with Hollywood portraying aerial combat. I don't know whether
I got a need for speed.
Yeah, you have crap like that.
Mark and Robert, you guys can be my wingman anytime.
Oh, stop. I cannot express to you how much I dislike that movie every time I watch it.
Pull up, Maverick. You're in a tailspin.
Just every time I watch it, I find something else to dislike. But, again, it's an interesting thing, and it's something that Hollywood, clearly tries to do. But for some reason, it's been difficult to really capture the feel of what it's like to engage in that kind of combat. I mean, I'm going to hate myself for this because I'm about to give. Hang on.
Can I address that?
Give credit to a James Franco movie.
Can I address what you're talking about there? I think.
Yeah, sure.
The impulse for a lot of filmmakers is to over-dramatize things and to make things really pop on screen. That's not what Christopher Nolan was trying to do here. Christopher Nolan was trying to give you a very raw sense of what it is to be in that battle, and while we all enjoyed Spitfire scenes, they weren't the most dynamic of things I've ever seen. This isn't dogfights in space, a la Star Wars. Red 5 standing by. And I think that's purposely done. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's a trap. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think therein lies the difference is when you're a filmmaker and you're like, okay, well, the object here is to entertain people. We want to make these aerial scenes pop on screen and make them more dynamic and more engaging. And you end up signing away some sense of realism in that Faustian bargain.
Yeah, I mean, I think the closest one that movie that I've seen that actually kind of engaged me within aerial combat was, again, God help me for actually praising a movie featuring James Franco, but Flyboys, which dealt primarily with World War I aviation rather than, World War II. And really, anytime James Franco is on screen in that movie, the quality drops, but the actual aerial combat is not half bad.
I thought you were going to say the James Franco movie where he went to Oz.
Mark. I couldn't possibly comment on a movie I haven't seen.
Okay.
And also, how dare you?
I can definitely hop in on this one, just in terms of kind of the aerial combat side of things. I mean, like I said, I was involved in Air Cadets, and there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, fighter pilot worship in that organization. And I mean, you get together, there's a pretty good chance you're going to see Top Gun, which obviously has connotations. One of the other gold standards was, I want to say, late 60s, Battle of Britain, which was kind of in this, to kind of talk about a little war filmography here, there's a period of time where we had, in the 60s and 70s, where we had these really exhaustively detailed, blow-by-blow war movies. The Longest Days are a really good example of that. I mean,
Battle of Midway.
Battle of Midway. I haven't seen that one, but Battle of Britain's a really good one. It's got Christopher Plummer. It's got Laurence Olivier, and it's actually quite a bit of fun. And that one, they were running a lot of actual Spitfires. They had the Spanish versions of the ME-109s in there, and it was quite good in detailing that. That said, the pacing of the movie is a little bit wonky, but that one's worth checking out if you want a good one. The other, I haven't seen Flyboys either, and I know there's a couple others that I haven't had a chance to watch. Actually, a couple of German movies about the First World War that I need to check out. But probably one of the better ones that I saw that at least kind of worked well with the CGI is probably Red Tails.
I haven't seen that one.
Red Tails is worth checking out. It's
right.
got some funky dialogue, but you can tell which scenes George Lucas was directing.
Yeah.
Yes, well.
I am not kidding.
I believe you. But touching on what Mark said about, you want to make things pop on screen, and, striking that balance is very difficult. Honestly, I think my favorite scene when it comes to the Spitfires is actually, and it's really weird because there's a lot of really good ones. There's some solid, intense aerial combat. I think my favorite shot is one where it's from Tom Hardy's first-person perspective, and it's just of the open sky, and you get a little bit of, like, one of the wingtips on, like, the right-hand corner of your screen, and it's very clearly establishing, just him trying to find the target. And It was a really wonderfully immersive shot. It doesn't last more than, 5-10 seconds, but excuse me. There's a lot of little things like that really work well in this film. And I got to be honest, I wanted to cheer at right near the very end when Tom Hardy, after he's out of gas, just in full glider mode, shoots down that plane as it's trying to line up a strafing shot. I was very, very invested in again, all of these characters. The sequence with the pilot who gets shot down as he's trying to get out of his cockpit because the latch to open it jams, and he's going under and he's going to drown. There's so much goodness here. All the scenes where any of the scenes where the boats are sunk, there's a very real claustrophobic sense of trying to impart to the viewer the experience of being in an enclosed area as a ship is sinking and you're starting to drown. The best, Mark and I joke about this, the best reviews are the ones where we can tear things apart because it's all so bad. It's hard when it's all good. I don't have really a bad thing to say about this.
Yeah, I want to let's get Andrew in here, and then let's move on to the money. Why don't you go ahead and give us your craft review, Andrew?
I mean, the craft on the movie is incredibly solid. I mean, it's everything that you kind of come to see from Nolan. I mean, as we've talked about a little bit, the time shifts in this movie and the way they edit that together, and the way they're constantly intercutting that to build your sense of tension, it's absolutely fantastic. I will say one thing that worked gangbusters is the sound design. As I already alluded to it a little bit earlier, like during the Spitfire scenes, when you've got when you can hear the wing loading, when you can hear, anyone who's been in a small airplane, you hear a lot more when you're on a airliner, and when you're in a high performance small airplane, like you hear a lot of different stuff going on. So I mean, that's great. The other thing that worked, I think, just gangbusters, and I think just made you crawl down under your seat every time, was when the German planes, and those are very specifically Ju-87 Stukas, which were a dive bomber. Anytime those things were on the screen, and you heard, and that's the sound they made. It was actually a siren that they attached to the planes. They were very specifically a terror weapon. Like, those things would go into the dive, and you just hear every speaker in the thing hear that wail, and you'd want to start crawling under your seat. And, I mean, that just worked so well. I mean, the performances were universally awesome. I mean, Kenneth Branagh was great as always. Cillian Murphy was great. Mark Rylance was fantastic. Tom Hardy, I mean, I'm going to wait until they just really cut this guy to acting with his eyebrows, and we'll see what we can get out of him. Because, I mean, literally the guy was acting with his eyes for the entire performance. And, don't want to jinx him or anything. If anyone wants to give him some award looks this year, I wouldn't complain about it, because he got a lot out of that movie with just being under a flight mask for the whole time. I'm going to say my probably, and I mean experientially, I mean, you guys touched on it, all the stuff around being on the ships, about being in sunken ships. This is a movie that kind of fits in that interesting category of not only being about a specific war, but in a lot of ways being about war itself, about the waiting, about the terror, about the randomness, about a lot of those things that are out of your control, that are horrific. I will say probably my one issue with it, to go as far as kind of casting and character, pardon me, character differentiation, I definitely found following around some of the privates on the beach was a little bit difficult, and where they ended up and everything like that. Mainly because they all seemed to kind of, cast dark-haired guys. Like, they needed to do something a little bit more to differentiate them. I think the only guys I really had an easier time differentiating from were when they ran into the guys from the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. But
they needed to have gimmicks. You have one guy in a monocle, one guy in a top hat, one guy in a Sherlock hat.
Well,
what?
It's funny you bring that up, because they kind of went with that a little bit once they brought in the Highlanders, because I don't know how familiar you guys are with Commonwealth military, but the headdresses and the unit insignias and stuff like that have a lot of variance depending on where you're from and stuff like that. So at the very least, what you could have done is maybe had the three guys end up with uniforms from different units. Maybe one guy's wearing a Tommy helmet, one guy's wearing a beret, one guy's wearing a Glengarry or something like that, just to differentiate a little bit more. That's it. I mean, I thought everyone's acting was really good, and I mean that's about as far as the criticism as I'll take with the movie. I mean, I think you can talk about, do you put in more context? Do you give more of what happened, more of what's overview and things like that, or do you really just drop everybody in there and let them experience it? And I think that at the end of the day, was a right decision.
Oh, the last thing I want to comment on.
Wait a minute, why are you yelling at me? This is the first time
we
I've
had
made
a whole
joke
bit
on this
last
show.
week
Jesus.
when we were dealing with, monkeys need to dress up with monocles and top hats.
Are you talking about me?
We
No,
don't need a thing every week where we find an excuse for some character to wear a monocle, a top hat, and a fake mustache.
I could find a reason.
I'm well aware of that.
Charlize Theron listening to Depeche Mode and a fake mustache? Come on now. It's $1 million. It's $1 million idea.
That's below the belt, all right? Because Charlize Theron can do basically anything.
All right.
The last
just must love
thing I
Kate
want to
Blanchett's
say.
hat from Ragnarok.
You had to bring that up, didn't you? All right. Anyway, the last positive thing Go ahead, Mark.
Robert's not a fan of the new Thor movie, which
at all.
I didn't get the sense with the first trailer, this Comic-Con trailer. It's looking a little Guardians of the Galaxy. They seem to have lost the point of Thor and have decided we're going to go full on sci-fi epic.
That's my big gripe. And honestly, if Surtur doesn't just smack the Hulk aside like a little bitch, I'm going to be pissed.
We'll see what happens.
Because, seriously, Surtur, guys. No context. All right. Last thing I want to say, because I haven't brought it up, we touched on sound design, the music. Hans Zimmer scores this thing, and, again, Hans Zimmer's brilliant. The music here, it's almost impossible to differentiate, in some respects, the music from the sound design, because a lot of his musical choices play into the sounds that are just like ambient to the film. It's a really impressive bit of work that Zimmer put into this when I felt compelled to bring that up specifically. The soundtrack here is very, very good. It complements the movie exceptionally well.
You know what, Robert? It's interesting you bring it up because he's definitely done that on a few movies. I think very specifically, Man of Steel, he seemed to be really good about kind of matching up his music with sound design.
Yeah, and, Mark and I did a whole podcast defending Man of Steel. Those of you who haven't heard that one. We got negative. That was the one that you pointed out, like, hey, the show hasn't even gone live yet, and we're already getting negative comments.
We had, one of my friends, like we hadn't even made the argument yet, and she'd already been posted on there. She's like, nope, Man of Steel sucks. Sorry. I'm like, great. This makes this a worthwhile endeavor.
Very constructive addition to our discussion. Yeah. No, Hans Zimmer is an exceptional film scorer. He's going to surpass John Williams in the very near future. I'm relatively sure of it.
He ain't no Danny Elfman.
Right. Really? You gotta poke that at me, Mark? Come on. Well, why? Why do you do this to me? You know what? Just for that, I'm going to go order a giant platter of ribs, and I'm going to just send you pictures of it.
Nice smoked ribs, huh? Okay.
I'm not even going to eat them. I'm going to feed them to my dog.
Wow, that's a waste. It's fun.
She'd be very happy, and then very, very sick, wouldn't you? All right. I think that's all we have on craft. Again, as far as movie craft, I got to say this before we move on to the money, because this got brought up. I heard Samir Khadi say this after he saw Interstellar, because I agreed with him wholeheartedly. His review of Interstellar was specifically, like every overly ambitious Christopher Nolan project, it is not without flaws, but like every ambitious Christopher Nolan project, it is excellent. Which I feel is a relatively fair assessment of Interstellar, which is, I love that movie. I love that movie to death.
So good.
That's the movie with the space
here he
bookshelf,
managed
right?
to. Sorry, what was that?
That's the movie with the space bookshelf, right?
You haven't actually seen the movie, Mark. See the movie, then we can discuss it.
Okay.
It sounds silly, but it works.
Okay.
There's context to the bookshelf. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. It's on Amazon Prime right now, streaming. If you have the time to watch it, it's great. It's not as great as when you see it in theaters, which I did, and I was so grateful for, because that wall of water seriously still gives me chills. But I don't have any of those. I feel this is probably the best technically executed film Nolan has done. I don't have any. Again, I have no legitimate negative criticism to give. Take that however you will. All right.
I think as an endpoint, the final thing that should be said about this movie is that it is better than The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay, that's fair. Of course, Mark thinks The Dark Knight Rises should be universally scorned as much as Batman and Robin.
So bad.
It's
all right,
not that
Here's a quick
bad.
question for you guys.
All right.
What was that, Andrew?
Quick question for you guys, just on this one, since I've seen it come up in ratings and criticisms, and maybe we'll get into that in a little bit. Did you guys have any concerns for or against the level of violence in the movie?
No, I was actually, but it's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking about Saving Private Ryan, and the horrors of war, and the whole storming of the beach of Normandy. They drop the ramps, and immediately guys start getting gunned down. And I think if you're gonna tell a war story, don't be apologetic about it. Be honest, be brutal. I think the marketplace should decide whether or not people are going to be interested in that sort of story. And if people aren't interested in it, then stop making those stories. But if people are interested in it, then why not give them an unvarnished version of the truth? Does that make sense?
Yeah. For me personally, because they shied away so much from battle sequences, I was okay with it. If you're asking my personal opinion, I'm a gore hound. As long as it serves a narrative and serves a purpose, bring it on. If your movie exists as nothing more than an excuse to slap, torture porn on something, no, that's stupid. But if it serves a purpose, if it is in service to, be it a horror story, a war movie, or just as an accentuator to, a modern Western like No Country for Old Men, sure. Doesn't bother. I am not squeamish. I could have maybe done with a little bit more here, but at the same time, the story that they're telling doesn't mandate a lot of battlefield carnage. So I was okay with it from that perspective. Had they thrown a little more in there, wouldn't have bothered me one bit, but I am also, weird like that. So take that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. I found... Sorry, Mark, were you going to go?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. Just very briefly, 50 words or less, then we're going to move on to the money.
I was about to say, I actually found it very effective without a lot of gore involved, just because of the, again, it was kind of my opinion is that, sometimes when Christopher Nolan's his best is that when he's using all the chops of a horror director without necessarily being a horror director. And I think he made it, when you look about it, go to the Batman movies, and Batman really works when he's a terrifying character. And I think he was able to get the terror and the horror and everything here without necessarily making it all that gory. And I don't have any problem with gore either, but I just think it's kind of an interesting argument on whether or not it's a craft issue with the movie.
I just think it was an artistic choice to avoid excessive gore in this case because of the style of story he was telling. And again, I thought it worked. It also makes it more widely accessible to audiences rather than, because a lot of people were put off by the violence in Saving Private Ryan. So I can see there's plenty of arguments all the way around there. All right, Mark. Hit that sweet. Shane McMahon survived a helicopter crash in the ocean. Nobody takes better bumps than Shane O'Mac. Go ahead and hit his music. Not a joke.
I'm not.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have
sorry.
the
Hang on.
studio open. Damn it.
I do. I will find it. Where's my H's? Here we are. No, not a joke.
Here comes
For
the
those of you who
money.
missed that.
Here comes
For those
the
of you who
money.
missed it, Shane McMahon's helicopter crashed in the ocean, and he survived without a scratch. Because
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
All right. Dunkirk, released on a $100 million budget, made $113 million this weekend. It was the number one movie of the weekend. Placing, now, that puts it at roughly worldwide.
113
million. It puts it at 36 between Buddies in India and Baby Driver, just behind King Arthur, Power Rangers, and John Wick. Not a lot of movement in the top five. It's still the same top five it's been all summer.
Really?
Boy, we really slammed. Yeah, we really slammed the shit out of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Are you sure?
But it's actually making money.
Are you sure you're looking at that right? Because I know Despicable Me has crossed like 700 million worldwide.
I said the top five.
All right.
There's no movement in the top five. Number 6, Spider-Man made it to number 8, which dropped Transformers to number 10. Transformers, despite the fact that it made $551 million, still not making any money.
Bomb.
War for the Planet of the Apes, which came out last weekend, is currently sitting at $177 million. And that's about it as far as placements go. Next weekend, we've got the Emoji Movie, which my kids desperately want to go see.
Boo.
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
Yay.
I will watch the YouTube
However,
clips of Patrick Stewart being the poop emoji, and that's it.
Wait for that to come out on YouTube, then.
Well, we're gonna review Atomic Blonde. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Which is actually getting less release. It's being released in less theaters than the Emoji Movie. Like the Emoji Movie is like the big movie of next weekend.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you want to go see 30 Years of Garbage, the Garbage Pail Kid story. I don't even know where that's getting released.
Yeah. How about I inject myself with some kind of virulent streptococcus?
Okay.
Staph. God, staph. I meant staph, not strep. No, like seriously, I'd rather have like a staph infection than watch the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
On the domestic side of things, you have Beauty and the Beast is still number 1, Wonder Woman is number 2, and Guardians is number 3. Spider-Man has raced up the tracks to number 4. Logan's 5, Fate of the Furious 6, Despicable Me 7. Lego Movie is actually still hanging on at number 8. Get Out is Boss Baby. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at to see what movies are doing well in foreign lands versus where they are, versus how well they're doing in America. So like Pirates of the Caribbean is the number 11 movie domestically, but as I said, worldwide, on a $230 million budget, it's not doing too bad. $767 million. So not a whole lot to sneeze at there.
So Pirates 6 will feature a much more ethnically diverse cast, is what we're getting at.
Yes. It's going to be all Chinese Chinamen.
It can open up there with the Warcraft movie and whatever, and the next Transformers.
Maybe they'll do a combination of Warcraft and Pirates. It'll be Pirates of the Caribbean versus the Horde. What do you think, Andrew?
I actually haven't seen either of those, so I don't have enough to comment.
I think Mark should stop giving ideas to people who think he's serious.
I like this idea. The Horde on pirate ships. versus a drunk Johnny Depp. It'll be great. Alrighty. So, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Warcraft 2 title, like Dark Tides or something like that?
Tides of Darkness. That was the expansion to Warcraft 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about there being another movie.
There probably won't be. It was so bad.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of the money here? Because I got nothing at this point. I mean, Dunkirk's not one of these. I mean, if it makes it to $200 million, it'll be, a wild success. So,
which it probably will. Let's be fair. There's still a couple of major markets overseas it hasn't been released in yet.
Yeah.
This thing will do gangbusters in the UK.
Yeah, and the other thing about this movie. The other thing about this movie that I think needs to be brought up, I mean, we've talked in the past. I mean, Mark had a conniption when the Minions movie made more worldwide than Inside Out, and it was largely because the Minions film translates well to any audience, whereas the subtleties of dialogue and writing choices that went into Inside Out there might be a bigger issue with people either listening to a dubbed version or reading subtitles, however that happens to go. This movie has very minimal dialogue. I don't think there's going to be much of a problem with this playing to overseas markets, because what needs to be said in dialogue you can get that across relatively easily. This is very much a visual film that should play well worldwide. You don't need a deep grasp of the English language to really enjoy this movie.
No, I think it actually plays well for foreign audiences for that very reason.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's gonna play well in a lot of countries that have that. If there's enough people who still, I hate to put it this way, care about the Second World War, people who have that kind of memory of this period of the war, I think it will play better. Like I said, in the UK, I think it's going to do gangbusters for weeks. I think it's doing well up in Canada already. I mean, there was a story on the local news the other day that they had a 97-year-old gentleman who was at Dunkirk go to a screening last week. So, I mean, it's got that going for it.
So I was at the theater, and it was filled with elderly folk, which you would expect for a movie like this. But they showed a trailer for an inconvenient sequel, and some elder woman yelled out, "Get off your jet!"
Wait, what?
Share that with you. They were showing a trailer for an inconvenient sequel, and Al Gore is like, "We got to do X, Y, Z," and she just yells out of nowhere, "Get off your jet!"
Rock on, Florida lady.
Yeah. All right.
I will say one other quick thing about this.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Can someone please wheel up enough money for Christopher Nolan to do his passion projects so that he'll also do a World War II trilogy? Like, I really want Christopher Nolan's Battle of Britain next.
We'll see.
Right,
I mean, look, I'll see anything Nolan does at this point. He hasn't made a bad movie.
Well, there are some folks that would disagree with you. Let's hear from those folks.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
All right, bring it.
Phil Villarreal of ABC Tucson. A World War II movie your dad will fall asleep watching on the couch.
Well, I mean, your dad maybe, because he's just so terribly, terribly disappointed in you that he has to drink himself to death every night. I mean, how in the world do you arrive at that conclusion? No, this isn't. I mean, what is your perspective here? Like, how do you? Not just how do you arrive at that? how in the world are you so able to, readily read into the psychology of my parents? I mean, come on. That's... I mean, unless you're, vaguely trying to cast dispersions at films like, The Longest Day or The Sands of Iwo Jima, in which case, piss off. I mean, what's your perspective here? I mean, it's not filled with... This is going to be one of those days, all right? Look, Mark has given me none of these in advance, all right? He very rarely does. Every now and then there's one that's just so stupid he has to share it with me in advance. This is going to be one of those days where I'm yelling at critics because there's a bunch of them out there who are too stupid to pick up on things that are actually bits of spoken dialogue. Now that we're going to have to be dealing with a little bit of critical thinking, picking up on visual cues, and minimal dialogue, there's probably more of them. It's going to be one of those days, guys.
Jake Cole of Slant Magazine. The film's fussy ambition ultimately results in aesthetic and thematic sloppiness.
No. Okay, you're one of those people who just didn't get the converging timelines, right? I have to imagine that's it. You don't understand the shifting of perspective and the way the non-linear narrative structure. Because, wait, didn't he crash already? Why are we back here at this? No, wait, didn't they already? I can't follow what's going on. Where is Mark Wahlberg throwing his wet hair around in slow motion while explosions take place in the background? I don't understand. Look,
wait a second. Where's the guy shoving the picture?
Go ahead.
So I was about to say, where's the guy lovingly putting the picture of his kid in the front of his tack vest before seeing it float down after the mine explosion later?
Yeah.
I fucking hate that.
If you can't follow the fractured narrative, fine. Say as such. Just come out and admit, I couldn't follow it. That's not the same as it being sloppy.
Well, also,
TonyMacklin.net. Go ahead.
So I was about to say, okay, so aesthetic sloppiness, okay, I can kind of get that, and I've heard criticisms about this is just Christopher Nolan being clever. Thematic sloppiness, how does this get away from the whole theme of survive, get off the beach, get home?
Good question.
It doesn't because this guy's bad at his job. All right, next one.
Yep.
TonyMacklin.net. Nolan seems somewhat uninterested in the human standing amid his spectacular effects.
Oh, for the love of... Did you not actually watch the movie? I mean, that's all I can arrive at here. No, I mean, this guy's so desperate to get off the beach, he's gonna, pretend to be a medic, and
Robert,
he's gonna...
You got to hear this next one.
Okay,
save your ranting. Your ranting.
I will very succinctly. This is actually nothing but a human interest story in the sense that it is focused on the people and what this does to them. If you can't pick that up with shell-shocked Cillian Murphy and a soldier so desperate to get off the beach that he'll do anything short of trying to swim the channel by himself, I don't know what to tell you. You're bad at your job.
Avi Offer of New York City Movie Guru says, a beautifully shot, shallow, and nauseating video game. Too much spectacle, capitalized spectacle for some odd reason, and not nearly enough humanism. A truly special effect that money cannot buy. It's the equivalent of dry, stale bread.
Okay. What do you... Okay, you're one of these people, right? You're one of these people who can't possibly comprehend... First of all, I mean, look, I give Mark a grief for being married to conventional narrative structure, right? Mark, I've given you this level of grief before, right?
Yes, you've actually used that same exact phrase.
Because I believe it to be accurate. This individual is so hopelessly mired in like in like 21st century aesthetics and choices that you can't conceive of gleaning information and the human element within a story of being delivered to you in any way other than a bunch of guys, in this case guys being non-gender specific, in any way other than characters sitting around a table pouring their souls out to each other. If character X isn't actually saying, boy, I sure hope I get home to my wife and kid, that's the only way this registers with you. Why are you so stupid? You're probably one of these jackasses who didn't get how Mad Max, how Fury Road told its story either. How can you not? Are you just not being properly educated as to how the visual medium of film works with minimal dialogue? Do you not understand the importance of acting rather than writing? Do you not understand how to make inferences? How to take a greater perspective than one character?
Yeah.
But, I mean, this person probably would have been just so thrilled if one of the characters sat down and rather hammily delivered again. I got a girl waiting for me, and she was 6 months pregnant, and when I left, and boy, I've really got to get home. Or I got a son at home that I've never seen. He was born once I was deployed. I mean, the boat captain expressing the loss of his son and trying to live up to that and processing that loss through an execution of duty is a deeply nuanced and human thing, but because it wasn't spelled out for you in bright neon signs, much like I have to imagine the sign above your bed reminds you that the toilet is to the left, not the right, you missed the mark. What's the matter with you people?
What? Leonard Maltin of LeonardMaltin.com.
Oh, the
Dunkirk
old man.
Left me feeling, yes, one of our four horsemen of the apocalypse. Dunkirk left me feeling vaguely dissatisfied with too many unanswered questions. For me, it missed the big picture. If that means I'm swimming against the tide, so be it.
Look, I can appreciate being the only guy willing to die on a hill about a movie not being good. I really can. I've done it. This is another instance of you failing to make inferences. You want this whole thing spelled out for you when that's not how this movie is constructed or executed. I mean, maybe you just have no grasp of history. I mean, you're an old man, so I assume you actually know the outcome of World War II. But, hey, I might be assuming too much.
Armand White of National Review. Nearly 2 hours of uninspiring mayhem. Dunkirk uses history as a pretext to show off the director's fascination for calamity.
I'm sorry, are you confusing Christopher Nolan with Roland Emmerich all of a sudden? Have you ever seen a Christopher Nolan film? The man does not have a penchant for calamity. If anything, he's very subdued. In this instance, yeah, it's war. You're being bombed and shelled, and you have nowhere to go. You're desperate to get out. Yet this is intentional. How do you not get that? There are choices.
My favorite part of this
here.
entire bit is watching Robert Winfrey have one meltdown after another.
The point of this movie is to put you in within the perspective of these soldiers in a horrible, horrible spot. So, yeah, it's going to be disorienting. Yeah, it's going to be loud. And you know what? Yeah, because it focuses on one specific aspect, there's going to be other questions that if you're some kind of uncultured ingrate, you might not know the answers to. I wonder how that war turned out. I mean, these are the same types of people who got to the end of Fellowship of the Ring and went, wait, what actually happens? Don't they ever actually get to Mordor? Shut up!
I got to jump in on this one for a second.
Go ahead.
Like, I mean, I don't know if maybe because we're talking about Malton, right? Like, I don't know if he's pining for the days.
That one was Armand White of National Review.
So I'm going to go back to Malton for a second, but I mean, kind of along that whole question of dropping you in. Like, I mean, I don't know if we're pining for the days of the big epics, like, you know, Battle of Britain, like The Longest Day and stuff like that. And as much as fun as those films were, they were bloody slogs. Like, those things were hard to get through because they were just so expansive and so overwhelming, you didn't get an emotional core from it in a lot of cases.
Now, what this guy wants is, I imagine Leonard Maltin is actually harking back to the age of the 50s. He wants the Sharks and the Jets back, damn it.
All right,
does he want the Germans to come out in leather jackets and start snapping their fingers or something like that?
He wants dance fighting.
That's exactly what he wants. He wants Mickey Mouse. That's what he's into. All right, David Edelstein, or Edelstein, whatever you like. New York Magazine Vulture. This is another one I like to call upon. His views are usually terrible. Top critic. When the structure of Dunkirk becomes visible, when it stands as a mathematical demonstration of the brave individual choices lining up in a tidy row, you might realize that you've been had.
Okay. All right, let's start with this, okay? Let me just... First of all, generally speaking, by definition, every movie is about a coin flip to be a con job. Okay? Like Transformers. And here's my thing about Transformers. Not only do they all suck, but if you go into them expecting exactly what they are, they can be enjoyable. I know people who enjoy them. And much as I weep for them, much as I weep for them and pray for their immortal souls, I understand.
Hello.
It. I know, Mark.
Hi. I'm here.
This is not a con job. When you actually see the structure and finally understand it, and it all comes together in this beautiful harmonizing bit, that's the most rewarding part of this movie, is seeing the positive outcome of choices and heroism in the face of, terrible adversity and the horrors of war. I get that you don't want to, and I mean, really, I hate glorifying war in large part because to glorify it not only robs it of the horrible thing that it is, it also cheapens, true heroism, which is only effectively realized when set against the backdrop of all these horrible things. That's what makes it exemplary. That's what makes it heroic. That's what makes it inspiring. Now, this poor guy, I mean, maybe he's projecting. Maybe this is a man afflicted with future vision. And this review is actually about an upcoming fight. And he is projecting the inevitable sense of disembodied, disenfranchised disgust. And, wait, I just got had to every poor schmuck who's going to plop down $100 to watch the farce that is Mayweather-McGregor. That's the only thing I can think of here. Is this guy's actually talking about an event, 2 months from now, he's going to be saying, I told y'all, I told you. You were had. I mean, I've been saying that forever. But I mean, no. That is not an accurate descriptor of this film in any way, shape, form, or fashion under any reasonable context.
Can I jump in on this one for a second?
By all means.
I'm going to swing a fairly large bat here at a whole bunch of critics, including one that I watched this week, who I tend to agree with, but in this case I fundamentally disagree with them on Movie Bob Chipman. He's on YouTube. He does some interesting stuff. He's very good at explaining ridiculous comic book continuity. I'll send links later, but anyway. He's among the critics, and I think kind of in the realm of this guy, who has a couple of common criticisms with Christopher Nolan that I can't bloody stand at this point. The main one being that he's an unemotional filmmaker.
It's just wrong.
And I think he's an inherently emotional filmmaker. I mean, he doesn't express it in that way, but I think that goes to his craft, and I think it goes to him making you work for it. You want to know how I know Christopher Nolan wants you to work for it? Because he fucking said it in an interview once, talking about The Dark Knight Rises, where it's like, sure, I made him a little hard to hear. I want the audience to work for it a little bit. And I think that's kind of the joy of going to a Nolan movie, is that you get wrapped up in it and you get pulled in, and you know, again, he doesn't lead you down the garden path of this is how you should always necessarily feel. That said, when he does go there, I think it gets over like gangbusters, because you've kind of earned your way to the catharsis at the end of the movie. Like, I mean, a similar one we can talk about this year is Logan, where you go through all that brutality, and the catharsis at the end is fantastic. You know, a different game, but no one does that in almost every movie. Like, he takes you on this journey. He makes you work into it a little bit. And when you get there, it's a really satisfying experience. And, okay, sure, he likes to get out the bag of tricks every so often, because the man's a genius, and he, you know, God bless him for doing it. I mean, the movie I compare this to the most is Inception. Like, when you get some of those intercuts that work to make this movie go, you know, it's like the scene when they were collapsing all the different dreams in on each other from there. And I mean, to kind of play the counter on this one, if you were to just run all of these stories back to back, take out all the intercutting and everything like that, it would be a fairly boring movie. Because you don't have those cutaways to see what the other characters are doing. You don't have that ability to build tension through the shot, to build tension through the editing, and get you to that emotional closure at the end.
Okay. Hey guys, I would encourage you to keep talking if you so desire, but I am going to bail out. Just real quick, next week, Atomic Blonde right here on Damn You Hollywood. And then that's all the plugs I got for now. Tomorrow night on Metal Hammer of Doom, we're reviewing In This Moment. And then Andrew Graham is going to join me again on Thursday for Five Came Back. I started watching that today, Andrew. It's an interesting documentary. So I'll be anxious to talk to you about that.
I'm looking forward to it too, Mark. Definitely.
All right, man. I'll see you guys later.
All right, Mark.
Take care.
Yeah, in the same vein as kind of what Andrew touched on, I'll say this, and then we're going to go ahead and close up shop here. I actually think anyone who complains that Christopher Nolan is an unemotional filmmaker really misses the point. I think the true beauty of his filmmaking is that he's able to take big, grandiose, difficult to grasp concepts and stories and journeys and ground them emotionally. I mean, if you don't feel at least a twinge within your soul as Matthew McConaughey is sitting there watching 20 years worth of videos from his family back on Earth in Interstellar, I don't know what to tell you. You might want to make sure you have a pulse. I mean, you don't necessarily have to break down sobbing, but there is something to be felt there. There is that core of relatable human emotion that he imparts to his movies, and that's why the bigger stuff works, because there is something about it that on a human level, universally, we all do relate to. And again, I think if your complaint is, well, he's mechanical and unemotional, you're actually just missing the plot. You have just completely missed the fundamental point to what makes his movies work. And
Amen,
that's all I've got. That's all I've got on that one. All right. Like Mark said, next week we're reviewing Atomic Blonde, where I will try to keep my fanboyism to a minimum. I don't have a lot of things I fanboy over, but look, Charlize Theron could tell me to jump off a moderately high bridge, and depending on various circumstances, I might do it. So tune back in for that. Andrew, do you have anything you want to plug? And thank you for being here, by the way. Nice to have you on.
Oh, thank you very much, Robert. I very much enjoyed being on tonight's show. Very much enjoyed the movie and enjoyed talking about it with you guys. So for sure. Plugs. Because we are in a little bit of a World War II theme week, aren't we?
A little bit.
All right, I'm going to start by recommending what I actually have sitting on my couch here, which is a book called The Second World War by Anthony Beevor. This is probably about the most comprehensive World War II book I have come across, where he literally covers every single theater of it, and he actually goes back a little bit in time and more positive to saying that it started, if you really want to look at the Second World War, it really started in some ways in 1937 when the the Japanese invasion of China happened.
Well, I've said this in the past. I tend to feel that the distinction between World War I and World War II is a very American thing. And I suppose we could probably add Canada to that. If you're to really understand World War, I mean, there's a lot of places in Europe where you can really make the point that World War I and II is just one long, prolonged conflict. The distinction is, again, it feels like a very Western distinction to make in large part. And some of that's just because, again, we got done with World War I, and, I can't speak to the Canadian history, but the Americans kind of went back to isolationism. Didn't work out so well. But yeah, it really does fascinate me, the history that goes into those two conflicts in particular. And I will have to see about picking up that book. I actually have, again, my real passion for military history is the American Civil War. I have the 3 rather lengthy narratives that Shelby Foote penned, which incidentally, if that particular period in American history interests you, you can't find a better discussion of it than those 3 volumes.
So to that end, Robert,
good.
If you're interested in kind of the transitionary period between World War I and World War II, I would also thoroughly recommend to you Paris 1919 by Margaret Macmillan.
I've heard really good things about that one. I keep meaning to give it a listen because the way those whole things, again, the Treaty of Ghent, which I believe is what it was. I might be misremembering.
Versailles.
Versailles, yeah. Ghent. Why did I say Ghent?
Ghent ended the 1871.
It ended one
war,
of them.
Theoretically, that can also tie in as well if you really want to get into it. The other one from hers I would also recommend if you're interested is The War That Ended Peace, which talks about the run-up to World War I as well.
Okay. I'll give those a look. Thank you very much for that. Expanding my reading list, guys. Always happy to have that. All right. Only other brief plugs for me. I have coverage of UFC 214 this coming Saturday, so that'll be interesting. Hopefully the card holds together. So stop by the MMA Zone of 411 Mania for that one. You can hear Pat Mullen and I preview that event on the 411 Ground and Pound radio show from this last Sunday. And this coming Sunday, we'll be reviewing UFC 214 and previewing Fight Night 114. Yeah, 114, which is actually not a bad card. There's a few decent fights there. So, all right, I think that's everything for us. Thanks to Mark, as always. Thanks to Andrew for being here. And until next time, everyone out there, please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.